The brutal confrontation between a troop of baboons and a lion. The African savanna was slowly awakening under the rising sun when Joaquín Álvarez, a Mexican biologist and wildlife documentarian, adjusted the zoom on his Canon EOS R5 camera. The dawn silence was only interrupted by the soft buzzing of the DJI Mavic 3 drone that his assistant, Luis Mendoza, controlled with precision at about 100 meters altitude. The team, sponsored by National Geographic in collaboration with the National Autonomous University of Mexico, UNAM, had been in Kenya's Masai Mara National Reserve for 3 weeks, documenting the social behavior of olive baboons, Papio anubis, one of Africa's most adaptable and territorial primate species. "Look, they're starting to move," whispered Joaquín to Marina Velázquez, a primatologist from UNAM who accompanied them on this expedition. Scar's troop is descending toward the river. Scar, as they had nicknamed the alpha male of this troop of nearly 70 baboons, was an imposing specimen weighing over 40 kilograms, recognizable by a scar that crossed his face, the result of an encounter with a leopard years before. His group dominated a privileged section of territory near the Mara River, where access to water and fruit-laden acacia trees gave them significant advantages over other troops. "They're heading toward the area where we saw lion tracks yesterday," observed Marina with concern, adjusting her Swarovski binoculars. "This could get interesting." What none of the researchers anticipated was that they were about to witness one of the most extraordinary interspecies confrontations ever documented, an event that would challenge many established notions about predator-prey dynamics in the African savanna. Through the field monitor connected to the drone, the team observed how the baboon troop efficiently deployed in a feeding formation, juveniles and females with young in the center, vigilant adult males on the periphery, and subadults exploring the intermediate zones, a choreography perfected through millions of years of evolution. "It's impressive how they maintain the social structure even during movement," commented Joaquín, who had been documenting animal behavior for more than 15 years for publications such as National Geographic, BBC Wildlife, and Mexicanísimo Natura. Each individual knows exactly their position and function. What happened next was recorded not only on their cameras' memory cards, but in the history of modern primatology. About 200 meters from the troop, partially hidden behind a mound and the tall golden grass, a majestic adult male lion waited. This wasn't just any lion. The researchers immediately recognized him as Titan, a solitary male with a dark mane who had been expelled from his coalition 6 months earlier, according to Jackson Muturi, the Maasai guide accompanying them on the expedition. Since then, Titan had been forced to hunt alone, facing the difficulties this posed for an animal adapted to cooperative strategy. "He's in ambush position," murmured Luis, who had lowered the drone to avoid altering the animal's natural behavior. "But something's not right. The baboons are heading directly toward him, as if they knew he was there," completed Marina, intrigued. "This contradicts everything documented about predator avoidance in primates. Indeed, the troop not only continued advancing toward the lion's position, but seemed to have modified its formation. The largest males, including Scar, had taken vanguard positions, while the females grouped the young toward the rear. This wasn't an accidental encounter, it was a deliberate confrontation. The first visual contact between Scar and Titan was perfectly captured by Joaquín's camera. The baboon, standing on his hind legs to gain height, displayed his formidable canines in an aggressive grimace while emitting a deep bark that alerted the rest of the troop. Titan, discovered, abandoned his stalking posture and adopted a defensive position, with his mane bristling and a deep roar that reverberated across the savanna. "This is completely unusual," explained Marina, without taking her eyes from the binoculars. "Baboons typically avoid direct confrontation with large felines, opting for escape to trees or rocky areas." What we're seeing is... Her words were interrupted by the sudden mobilization of the troop. As if following a premeditated plan, approximately 20 adult males began to deploy in a wide semicircle, partially surrounding the lion while emitting a cacophony of intimidating barks and screams. The females, meanwhile, led the juveniles to the safety of a nearby group of acacia trees, but surprisingly, several of them returned to join the front line once the young were safe. Titan, evidently confused by this unusual tactic, roared again and charged against one of the flanks, perhaps hoping to disperse the primates. In any other scenario, this strategy would have worked. However, instead of fleeing in panic, the baboons executed a maneuver that left the researchers stunned. They briefly separated to avoid the initial attack, but immediately counterattacked from multiple angles. "This is incredible," exclaimed Joaquín, frantically documenting the scene. They're using coordinated harassment tactics, similar to what hyenas do, but with a superior level of organization. The lion, accustomed to being the undisputed predator, now found himself in a defensive position, surrounded by at least 30 baboons, alternating between threats and quick attacks. Scar, demonstrating why he was the troop leader, executed a bold frontal advance, distracting Titan while 2 adult males attacked from the flanks, inflicting quick but painful bites on the feline's hind legs. "They're systematically attacking vulnerable points," observed Marina with professional amazement. "The hind legs, the base of the tail. They're progressively immobilizing the lion." The battle intensified over the next 20 minutes, a period that Joaquín would later describe as the primatological equivalent of the Battle of Thermopylae. The lion, despite his strength and lethal capacity, was overwhelmed by the baboons' coordination and persistence. For every swipe he managed to connect, he received multiple bites and attacks from angles impossible to defend simultaneously. The turning point came when Scar, in a maneuver of extraordinary audacity, managed to jump onto Titan's back during a moment when the feline was disoriented. The baboon's powerful jaws closed on the lion's right ear, tearing off a considerable piece of tissue. Titan's roar of pain resonated across the savannah as he desperately tried to get the primate off his back. "It's a high-risk strategy," commented Luis, who had resumed recording with the drone to capture an aerial perspective of the confrontation. "If the lion manages to reach him with his claws..." But Scar, demonstrating extraordinary agility, jumped out of Titan's reach just as 5 other males launched a coordinated attack against the feline's front legs. Blood was becoming visible at several points on the lion's body, whose energy showed evident signs of exhaustion. Finally, after almost 30 minutes of confrontation, Titan executed what appeared to be a desperate charge toward a space between 2 baboons, managing to break the siege and undertake a hasty retreat toward the thickness of the savannah. The troop did not pursue him beyond about 100 meters, but maintained a vigilance line while emitting vocalizations that the researchers interpreted as signals of victory and warning. "They've just rewritten everything we knew about baboon-lion dynamics," declared Marina, visibly excited by the scientific implications of what they had witnessed. "This wasn't an opportunistic encounter or a desperate defense. It was a deliberate and coordinated offensive strategy." The aftermath of the confrontation was equally fascinating for the research team. Far from dispersing, the troop regrouped in a formation that allowed Scar and other dominant males to exhibit their battle wounds, receiving specific grooming from females. The juveniles, who had been observing from the safety of the trees, gradually descended to reintegrate with the group. "It's as if they were celebrating and reinforcing social bonds after the victory," observed Joaquín, who by then had accumulated more than 2,000 photographs of the event. "This suggests a level of collective consciousness that we traditionally don't associate with non-hominin primates." 3 days after the confrontation, the team managed to locate Titan again. The lion presented visible but non-critical wounds and had managed to hunt a warthog, suggesting that his survival capacity had not been permanently compromised. However, he now actively avoided Scar's troops' territory, a behavior that contradicted the typical predator hierarchy in the savannah. The documentary material collected by Joaquín and his team generated unprecedented interest in the international scientific community. Dr. Carlos Mendieta, director of UNAM's Institute of Ecology, described the images as a revolutionary paradigm in understanding primate social cognition and interspecies dynamics in competitive ecosystems. National Geographic dedicated a cover special to the discovery titled "The Strategists of the Savannah, Rewriting the Predatory Hierarchy," with Joaquín's spectacular photographs illustrating an article that would become one of the most cited in primatological literature of the decade. Dr. Kevin Richardson, known as the Lion Whisperer and founder of the Kevin Richardson Wildlife Sanctuary in South Africa, offered a particularly valuable perspective on the observed behavior. What these Mexican researchers have documented challenges our anthropocentric perception of animal intelligence. The baboons demonstrated not only a tactical understanding of the confrontation, but a strategic capacity to identify a vulnerable predator and coordinate a preventive attack. This is not basic instinctive behavior. It's advanced social cognition. For Marina Velasquez, whose doctoral thesis focused precisely on the social organization of primates facing environmental threats, the discovery represented a validation of her theories about the adaptive capacity of baboons. I always maintained that we were underestimating these primates' cognitive abilities. What we witnessed wasn't an evolutionary accident, but the manifestation of a sophisticated behavioral repertoire that has probably evolved during thousands of years of coexistence with predators. The impact of the research transcended academic circles. The documentary Dethroning the King, produced by Joaquín in collaboration with TV UNAM and Discovery Channel Latin America, received the award for Best Nature Documentary at the Guadalajara International Film Festival and was used as educational material in universities throughout Mexico and Latin America. 6 months after the historic confrontation, the team returned to Masai Mara for longitudinal follow-up. Scar's troop had increased its territory by approximately 20%, incorporating areas traditionally dominated by big cats. Even more surprising, other baboon troops in the region seem to have adopted similar defensive formations, suggesting a cultural transmission of tactics that primatologists had previously observed only in great apes and cetaceans. What we're witnessing could be the primatological equivalent of a military revolution, explained Joaquín during a conference at the Anthropology Museum in Mexico City. These baboons not only modified their relationship with a specific predator, but are potentially altering the ecological balance of an entire region. Dr. Jane Goodall, pioneer in primate research and founder of the Jane Goodall Institute, commented on the discovery at an international symposium. The work of this Mexican team reminds us that nature always has lessons to teach us. Just when we think we understand the rules of the natural world, we discover that animals can rewrite them. The intelligence and adaptability these baboons showed invites us to reconsider the limits we have arbitrarily imposed on non-human cognition. For Joaquín Álvarez, who began his career as a young amateur photographer in the forests of Chiapas, the experience represented the culmination of a life dedicated to documenting the complexity of the natural world. When I started this project, I expected to capture interesting baboon behaviors. I never imagined we would witness something that would fundamentally change our understanding of predator-prey dynamics. It's a humble reminder that, as much as we believe we know the natural world, we have barely scratched the surface of its complexity. The confrontation between Scar's troop and Titan was not only immortalized in scientific publications and documentaries, but opened new lines of research on collective intelligence, cultural transmission in non-human primates, and the evolution of complex defensive strategies. For the baboons of Masai Mara, it was simply another day in the ceaseless struggle for survival. For science, it was a revealing moment that invites us to reconsider our place in the continuum of intelligence in the animal kingdom.